Judge Holbrook and those present in the courtroom initially believed she was merely a disoriented elderly woman. However, she quietly presented her bar card and systematically refuted the case before their eyes. Do you comprehend the charges against you, or should we proceed more deliberately? Judge Morris Holbrook's tone held a barely concealed hint of amusement. He reclined in his high-backed chair, folded his arms, and looked down at the elderly woman standing alone at the defense table. His voice held the same condescension he directed at blustering defendants who believed they could best him in argument. However, this wasn't a volatile young person with loose trousers and a defiant manner. This was a 72-year-old woman wearing a pale blue cardigan and sturdy orthopedic shoes, standing upright with her hands softly clasped over a well-worn leather handbag. Alma Vernice Whitaker faced charges of obstruction, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest stemming from a protest 2 weeks prior at Bakersfield City Hall. Leland Drury, the prosecutor, appeared to be no older than 30, presenting a polished image with shiny shoes and a demeanor suggesting unwavering self-assurance. He briefly looked towards the gallery, a slight grin on his face. A few individuals in the courtroom suppressed quiet laughter. The bailiff emitted a chuckle. A flicker moved across the stenographer's lips. Alma remained silent. Judge Holbrook struck the file before him. The document stated that he had pushed an officer and incited the crowd to defy orders to leave. Such bold claims from a person of his stature. A fresh ripple of laughter spread through the room. The judge peered over his spectacles towards her. He noted the absence of legal counsel. No attorney, I presume? She then spoke, her voice calm and measured. No, Your Honor, Alma replied, a statement that visibly startled Leland. His head angled as if he hadn't understood. Madam, are you aware this is a criminal proceeding? You are facing genuine charges. Alma did not react. I am fully aware. Would you like to see my bar card? A moment of silence followed. Then some laughter arose, people assuming she meant something else. However, Alma slowly reached into her handbag and produced a laminated card, somewhat yellowed around the edges. She positioned it carefully on the table and pushed it across. Holbrook peered, then leaned in. It displayed State Bar of California. Attorney Alma V. Whitaker, bar number 129804, was admitted on June 17, 1983. The room fell silent. She looked up and adjusted her reading glasses. I received my law degree from Howard in 1982, passed the bar the following summer, spent 12 years as a public defender in Detroit, and another 8 years working civil rights cases here in California, she stated. No one moved. I retired in 2003, she added, but I have kept my license active just in case. Judge Holbrook shifted in his seat. Drury cleared his throat, but said nothing. Alma addressed the judge directly. Before this courtroom determines my fate, I need to clarify some information. I was not organizing a protest. I was attempting to de-escalate it. There is a distinction, and I plan to demonstrate it. Point by point, her tone remained consistent. She did not increase her volume, but each word appeared deliberate and considered. The bailiff looked towards the judge. Holbrook examined her bar card once more, flipping it over, seeming to anticipate it might disintegrate. Alma remained motionless, as if she had held that posture countless times, and she had. Leland Drury then spoke, his voice slightly strained. Your Honor, we cannot confirm this without official. It's authentic, and I have additional documentation in this bag if needed, Alma stated, interrupting. Drury stopped speaking. Judge Holbrook paused, then concluded very well. The court acknowledges the defendant is representing herself. He then paused. A subtle murmur, a sense of bewilderment, rippled through the gallery. But Alma Whitaker offered only a slight, almost unnoticeable acknowledgement to herself. Her purpose wasn't to provide amusement. It was to underscore that appearances could be deceiving. However, Judge Holbrook wasn't prepared for the revelation she was about to unveil. The courtroom still hadn't fully settled. Judge Holbrook now sat with a more upright posture, observing Alma Whitaker with a different kind of focus, one devoid of irony. Leland Drury, who previously appeared relaxed, now seemed uncertain whether he's entered a genuine trial or a trap. His jaw was tight, but his eyes repeatedly looked at the judge as if anticipating support. Alma made adjustments to the microphone before her. I'd like to begin by addressing the prosecution's claims, beginning with the body cam footage. Or more specifically, the lack of it, Leland said. Your Honor, the official report indicates the footage from Officer Grunwald's body camera was deemed irrelevant because of a battery malfunction. This malfunction occurred precisely from the moment the officers arrived at the protest until I was placed in cuffs. She turned slightly toward the jury. It's a significant gap in the record, isn't it? She moved slowly, considering her words, much like lawyers sometimes do. However, this wasn't a performance, it was a genuine issue. According to the arrest report, 3 officers were involved, she stated. Only one officer's body camera footage was examined. The second one had malfunctioned, and the third officer's footage was, what did the report indicate? It wasn't uploaded due to an administrative error. She paused before the jury box and folded her hands. However, the report did include complete transcripts of what I purportedly said, without any accompanying audio. Judge Holbrook turned to Drury. Mr. Drury, is that an accurate representation? Drury cleared his throat. We presented the available materials, Your Honor. The lack of video recording does not invalidate the officer's testimony under oath. Alma didn't wait. Then we should discuss that testimony. Officer Grunewald stated I raised my fist, shouted push forward, and resisted arrest by locking my arms with another protester. I have provided 6 witness statements contradicting this. Each witness was present. They all confirm I positioned myself between the crowd and the police and requested people to move backward. Drury retrieved a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. She also stated a request had been submitted for a subpoena of Officer Grunewald's prior complaints, noting there were 3 related to misconduct during public gatherings, all of which had been dismissed quietly. A ripple of reaction passed through the gallery. Drury raised an objection. She questioned the relevance, asking if the complaints had resulted in a conviction. Alma turned, her voice firm, asserting that a pattern of behavior matters, particularly when it's the same behavior repeated. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room. Please focus, Ms. Whitaker. She nodded once, then presented a second document. I also want to discuss the photograph the prosecution introduced as evidence. Exhibit C, the image depicting me mid-step, encircled by police officers. She displayed the printout. The prosecution asserted this indicated I was advancing towards the officers, seemingly ready to oppose arrest. However, if you examine it closely, she provided a magnified copy to the clerk. You'll observe my palms are raised, open, directed outwards. This is a widely recognized gesture of de-escalation. She looked at the jury again. One doesn't approach armed police with raised hands unless attempting to avert a greater harm. The room was silent. There was no laughter now. Even the gallery had leaned forward. Drury attempted to regain control. Despite those gestures, the defendant disregarded a legal instruction to leave. Alma turned to him slowly. What legal instruction, Mr. Drury? The arrest record details an order issued by Officer Grunwald at 6:32 p.m. A time-stamped photo demonstrated that I was already in restraints by 6:28. She paused, allowing that information to register. This suggested the order was either issued belatedly or wasn't given at all. Judge Holbrook moved, appearing noticeably uneasy. Leland remained silent. Alma inhaled deeply. Therefore, considering the absence of audio recordings, the conflicting timeline, the missing video, and the testimony that disputes witness accounts, what remains to support prosecution? She did not appear self-satisfied. She expressed no sense of triumph. She seemed weary. Weary, as if she's faced this scenario countless times and understood the process intimately. Alma then introduced a surprising element, video evidence that fundamentally altered the case. She placed a small USB drive across the table, explaining that it contained footage recorded by a college student, Victor Ramirez. He had been filming from the second floor of the parking garage, overlooking City Hall. I've already submitted it to the clerk for review, Judge Holbrook observed. What does this video depict? Alma responded directly. The clerk placed the drive into the court screen system. A grainy yet stable video appeared on the monitor. It showed the protest happening below. People were shouting and holding signs, while police officers created a barricade. Then, Alma became visible, her small figure moving through the crowd. She was not shouting. She did not raise her fists. She did not link arms or chant. She was waving her hands down in a motion recognizable to anyone who had previously broken up a fight. "Back up!" Her voice rang out, surprisingly loud and clear for a woman her age. "Don't push, stay calm." The video captured the entire incident. She positioned herself between two officers and a group of teenagers holding cardboard signs. She faced the crowd, not the police. Her hands were raised, again palms outward. Shortly after, one officer lunged. Another joined in. They seized her arms, pulled her backward, and placed handcuffs on her. She offered no resistance. She displayed no reaction. The room was completely silent. Following an additional 30 seconds of footage, the screen faded to black. Alma addressed Judge Holbrook. "The officer's report stated that I charged the barrier, urging others to defy. However, in that video, I was the sole individual attempting to prevent the situation from worsening. That video was not presented by the prosecution, despite Officer Grunewald's knowledge of its existence." According to information, Victor provided a copy to the department the day following the protest. He received no response. Holbrook glanced at the bench, his jaw tense. Mr. Drury was asked, "Did your office receive this footage?" Leland Drury's face appeared pale. He stated, "I was not informed, Your Honor." Alma did not look at him. It wasn't necessary. Mr. Ramirez reported that he provided it to a plainclothes officer, who informed him it wasn't required. He speculated that they had already determined their version of events. A woman in the gallery murmured, "Lord have mercy." The judge's gavel fell once, a gentle sound intended to restore order. He regarded Alma as if encountering her anew. "You stated you retired in 2003? She affirmed, "That is correct." Following 20 years of observing cases similar to this, he inclined his body forward. "And why return now?" Her tone became gentler. "Because I grew weary of awaiting another person's concern." She advanced several steps, not for effect, but because remaining seated was no longer possible. "I had hoped that if I simply adhered to the guidelines, remained quiet in retirement, read the paper, and offered occasional assistance, perhaps the world would resolve itself. However, the reality is that Mr. Drury's actions aren't unprecedented. Officer Grunewald's behavior isn't new. This pattern, this tendency of accusing first, investigating later, that's not a recent development. I'm familiar with it. I've observed it since I was 30 years old, and it hasn't diminished." She addressed the jury, her gaze sweeping across the panel. "I didn't come here today to create a spectacle. I am here because if this court determines my guilt relying on the testimony of individuals who are not entirely truthful, then what becomes of the next person lacking supporting evidence, or a recorded statement, or the courage to come forward?" There was no response. Even Drury had become completely still. Judge Holbrook leaned back slowly in his chair, but just as the situation seemed as dire as it could be for the prosecution, Alma brought the room to a complete standstill. Alma reached into her handbag once more, carefully and deliberately, and produced a folded document. It appeared unassuming, lacking a prominent legal stamp or highlighted sections, simply a standard police transcript printed on regular letter paper. "I'd like to read something into the record," she stated calmly, from Officer Timothy Bragg, who was present that afternoon but not called as a witness. Judge Holbrook scrutinized her. "Was this statement presented to the court prior to today?" Alma responded, shaking her head once. "It was not. I received this document yesterday through a records request. The process was challenging and required me to call upon a few previous obligations." She flattened the paper and began reading. "I arrived on scene at approximately 6:15 p.m. I observed Alma Whitaker moving through the crowd, repeatedly telling people to step back and remain peaceful. I did not witness her shout aggressively, or instigate. When I saw her being taken into custody, I was surprised, as she was the only individual I observed attempting to calm tensions. She glanced upward, allowing the quiet to linger. Leland Drury adjusted his position in his chair. His fingers momentarily played with a pen. That officer was not involved in the arrest. Does that mean his account is unreliable? Alma completed his thought, her voice now more pointed. Then why wasn't his name mentioned in the witness list provided by your office? Not even as an addendum. You state your pursuit is of the facts, Mr. Drury, yet the facts that dispute your narrative are discreetly omitted. The judge asked, Mr. Drury, can you confirm whether Officer Bragg was interviewed during the investigation? Drury paused. I'd have to check the original intake file. There's no need, Alma stated. I verified. He submitted his statement the night of the arrest. It was signed, time-stamped, and remained unreviewed, unmentioned. She approached the jury once more. This case was never about disorder. The aim was to make an illustration of an individual who appeared harmless but refused to conform. She indicated softly towards the screen, which remained dark from the preceding video. They hadn't anticipated someone like me would speak, and after I did, they attempted to characterize me as disruptive. That term is employed when people are reluctant to acknowledge their discomfort with being questioned. A juror, a man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed beard, massaged the bridge of his nose and glanced downward. The others watched Alma intently, their attention complete. Judge Holbrook appeared weary, not due to Alma, but because of the situation unfolding before him. Your Honor, she spoke quietly. I request that all charges be dismissed based on procedural misconduct, incomplete evidence submission, and the suppression of exculpatory testimony. The judge remained silent for a moment. He clasped his hands and looked at the bench, tapping one finger in a steady beat. The courtroom held its breath. Alma remained silent. It wasn't necessary. Eventually, Holbrook raised his head. I will consider the request and reconvene following a brief pause, he stated. Alma acknowledged his words with a nod and returned to her place. Her hands were firm. There were no written notes, no additional legal representatives, no elaborate ceremony, only years of practice, and a resolute conviction that truth held significance, even when others were unwilling to acknowledge it. As the courtroom cleared for recess, Leland Drury hesitated before rising. He remained in his seat, appearing as someone who had just understood they'd brought a spoon to a gunfight. When Judge Holbrook attempted to regain control of the proceedings, Alma took an action that quieted the entire room. Upon resuming, the atmosphere had noticeably changed. The laughter and knowing comments had disappeared. Even those in the gallery sat more upright and silently, as if drawn into something more serious than anyone anticipated. Judge Holbrook returned, his face grave. The gavel struck once, a gesture seemingly perfunctory, and then Alma rose. She avoided legal terminology and refrained from raising her voice. She simply began to speak. There was a period, she started, when I would hurry into courtrooms carrying 20 case files, often repeating the same suit 3 times a week due to financial limitations. This occurred in 1987, in Detroit, at the Public Defender's office on East Grand Boulevard. Her voice remained steady, yet it carried an underlying sense of weight. I recall representing a 17-year-old, Ronaldo Briggs, who had been arrested because he fit the description of a purse snatcher. He was on his way home from school, carrying a trumpet case. The officer stated that he appeared nervous. One understands what nervous signifies when you are young, black, and walking alone. The courtroom was silent. The prosecution presented no purse, no eyewitness testimony, and no confession. The only evidence was that he attempted to flee when 2 officers emerged from an unmarked van. I paused, allowing my statement to resonate. The legal proceedings lasted 5 weeks. For 5 weeks, I sifted through evidence that others had discarded. I found a receipt for a school lunch inside his backpack, showing a timestamp 10 minutes prior to the crime. The police were dismissed from the case. By then, however, Ronaldo had missed his final band competition and lost his scholarship. Not to inflict blame, but to offer a tangible and lasting message. Cases like his remained with me, not because they were unusual, but because they occurred frequently. Too frequently. She inhaled deeply, centering herself. Do you believe I am here today because I enjoy conflict? Because I long for the extended hours and limited tolerance common in courtrooms such as this? She addressed Judge Holbrook, her tone calm. No, Your Honor, I am here because an unacceptable number of individuals like Ronaldo do not receive a second opportunity. Had I remained silent, had I simply departed when the protest began to escalate, another child might have occupied this seat, a child unable to advocate for themselves. She moved nearer to the bench. I'm weary of feigning that quiet ensures our security. Holbrook's hands were now clasped, his knuckles pale against the wood of the bench. He remained silent. He appeared as though he desired to speak. Alma redirected her gaze toward Drury. You're young? She asked him without harshness. Perhaps you still believe the system is equitable until demonstrated otherwise. However, that's inaccurate. The system is imperfect until someone insists on something superior. That's the duty. If you are unwilling to accept that responsibility, then this is not the appropriate venue, Drury said, his face reddening. He remained silent, unable to answer. Alma went back to her place. The quiet persisted. After a minute, Judge Holbrook made a sound as he cleared his throat and looked toward the clerk. But first he touched his forehead, as if the past was suddenly heavy upon him as well. He began to speak, then stopped. This wasn't for effect. It was simply a moment of hesitation. He appeared, for the first time in years, like a man questioning the words before him. I have examined the evidence presented by the defense, he stated finally, referencing the witness video, the police transcript, and the timing discrepancies. His voice faltered but subtly. This case was not managed appropriately, and it is the court's view that proceeding would be unfair. The courtroom was utterly silent. Ms. Whitaker, he said, his tone now more strained, this court dismisses all charges. A hush fell. There were no cheers, no vocal reactions, just a stunned silence, as if people were waiting for direction on how to respond. Alma did not smile. She closed her bag, rose, and nodded. This was not a gesture of triumph, but of respect. At that moment, Judge Holbrook, for the first time in years, found himself speechless. Within the courthouse, the sunlight streamed in, bright, dry, and sharp, much as it always did in Bakersfield around noon. Alma descended the courthouse stairs deliberately, not due to any physical weakness, but because she understood the value of savoring significant moments. She held her handbag securely beneath one arm, the soles of her shoes making a quiet sound against the pavement. Journalists waited expectantly on the sidewalk, their cameras already recording, microphones extended like lures. Many of them hadn't been present when the trial commenced. News had circulated regarding the retired black woman who entered the courtroom unaccompanied and emerged with the truth. Ms. Whitaker, are you considering legal action against the city? Did you anticipate the case's dismissal? Do you identify as an activist? She remained silent, not to evade attention, but because she had already spoken her piece, and that courtroom had been her sole intended audience. A small group of people waited for her at the foot of the steps. They weren't journalists. They were younger, late teens, perhaps early 20s, wearing hoodies, carrying backpacks, and sporting worn sneakers. Alma recognized one of them as Victor Ramirez, the student who had filmed the video. He kept his phone lowered, no longer recording, simply observing her. A young woman moved forward. She appeared to be just out of high school, her eyes bright and nervous. Ms. Whitaker, she said, I hope to be a lawyer someday, like you. Alma smiled for the first time all day. She offered a small smile, indicating her attention. The girl continued, that was the first time I saw someone actually win in court like that. You didn't just fight. You taught. Alma met her gaze directly. Then remember what you saw, because it won't always look that way. Most days it'll feel like pushing a brick wall uphill with your bare hands, and no one will applaud you. But you push anyway. Victor then spoke. The system had never anticipated someone like you possessing the ability to retaliate. I understand, she replied softly. They relied on it. A different boy interjected, could we learn from you? Perhaps by observing you closely, or conducting an interview, or something similar. You've witnessed events we've only read about. Alma surveyed the group, hesitating. She didn't aspire to be anyone's rescuer, yet she detected something within their gazes she hadn't observed in a considerable time. Hope intertwined with impatience. That familiar intensity. She straightened the handle of her bag. I avoid social media platforms. While I don't maintain a website, I still retain the ability to teach. Please bring your questions, and I'll provide the coffee. The group responded with quiet laughter. Victor's eyes lit up. Behind them, Judge Holbrook stood at the top of the stairs, observing everything. He was not accompanied by deputies at this time. He wore a blazer and a loose tie instead of a robe. For a brief moment, he seemed poised to speak, but then he remained silent. He observed Alma disappear around the corner with the children, her form gradually diminishing in the late afternoon sunlight. Returning inside, Leland Drury remained at his desk, his case file spread out but unexamined. His demeanor had altered. The usual self-satisfaction was absent. The characteristic severity softened. He looked at Alma's bar card resting on the bench, momentarily overlooked. Then, he reached for it, not to challenge it, but to review it. That name, that date, that accumulation of experience. The courtroom stood deserted now, yet something had changed within him. Perhaps not enough to alter everything immediately, but potentially enough to make him reconsider in the future. For the first time, he had witnessed the distinction between winning a case and truly comprehending justice. However, what Alma subsequently conveyed to those kids provided them with something beyond legal counsel. It offered them a foundation for hope. The diner on Union Avenue was nearly empty when Alma sat down with the kids that evening. She selected the booth by the window, the very one she'd occupied years ago when she used to meet with apprehensive clients who lacked confidence in courtrooms. The light from the setting sun illuminated the worn leather seats and transformed the Formica table a warm, golden hue. Victor requested coffee, despite not typically consuming it. The young woman, identified as Kenya, asked for iced tea and retrieved a notebook, already filled with notes. The remaining individuals positioned themselves closer, as if witnessing a solemn event. Alma didn't begin a lecture. She stirred her cup deliberately, then remarked, "You know the first thing they teach you in law school?" Victor blinked. "The Constitution?" She smiled faintly. "No, they teach you how to read a case file without getting emotional, how to separate the fact from the feelings, how to argue without letting it get under your skin." Kenya leaned forward. "Is that a good thing?" "It's necessary," Alma said, "but dangerous, too. The tendency to overlook the individuals behind the data can be insidious. It's easy to lose sight of the human element." She paused, setting her spoon down and meeting their gazes. "Remember the people." A quiet stillness settled over the group, not awkward but contemplative. One of the boys, previously silent, then voiced a question. "But how does one continue when there's no audience?" Alma released a slow breath, feeling the gravity of that inquiry. "You persist because occasionally someone is paying attention. They will only grasp the truth if it's spoken aloud, even when your voice trembles, even when the atmosphere chills." Kenya jotted notes rapidly in her notebook, but Alma countered, "Don't record this. Experience it. Make errors. Botch it, but maintain your integrity." Victor reclined in the booth. "Do you ever question it?" Remaining engaged for this duration, Alma hesitated. Her fingers followed the edge of her cup. "The loss of each client who deserved to be released weighed on me. Witnessing officers fabricate stories without hesitation caused me regret. And observing juries prioritize ease over honesty often made me question the value of my efforts." She paused, gazing out the window, but then I recalled the individuals who were ultimately freed, those whose voices were amplified, those who contacted me 5 years later simply to express gratitude. That is what truly holds significance. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Alma concluded her coffee and rose. The check had already been taken care of. Kenya had discreetly placed the bills beneath the sugar jar. Standing outside on the sidewalk, the children paused, seeming reluctant for the evening to conclude. Alma addressed them. "Do you want to change the system?" They affirmed. "Then don't merely study it. Challenge it. Pose more insightful questions. Confront the absence of discussion. Engage your intellect. Utilize your mobility. Employ your writing. And when someone advises you to wait your turn, inquire as to their reasoning for believing it's not your turn already. Kenya wiped her eyes. The others remained silent, observing her intently. Then Alma spoke a final statement. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be quiet. Following this, she proceeded towards the bus stop without turning back. Some stories transcend sensational news. They serve as reminders. That authority isn't consistently found in ceremonial garments or official positions, nor does it originate from the most vocal individual. Occasionally, it originates from a woman wearing a cardigan, managing the system as if she's performed this task previously. Because she has. When people inquire about the appearance of justice, they should recall her name, Alma Vernice Whitaker. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who would benefit from hearing it. And if you agree that wisdom isn't dictated by attire, please subscribe to hear more authentic stories that help us understand ourselves. A white student believed it would be amusing to shear a black student's hair in front of onlookers, but the reserved new student he targeted proved to possess a unique form of resilience. 13-year-old Tyrese Reddick requested little when he entered Crest Hill Middle School that Monday morning in Thousand Oaks, California. He carried his backpack, a well-used spiral notebook, and the same lunchbox he'd been using since 5th grade. His mom had written a brief message inside, as she always did, be yourself. That was sufficient. Tyrese felt no nervousness. He's experienced being the new student previously. 3 schools within the past 5 years, a consequence of his dad's work assisting military veterans transition to civilian life. This one didn't seem significantly different. Bright hallways, worn lockers, that familiar scratchy intercom crackle each morning. However, even before second period, he could sense the nature of this place. Students observed him. Not everyone, but a noticeable number. The long locks, carefully twisted and pulled back, distinguished him. He carried himself with quiet confidence. He avoided ostentation, opting for a simple style, clean sneakers, a tucked-in shirt, and earbuds during the bus ride. Yet, his presence was noted. In Mrs. Lamar's history class, a girl with freckles whispered, "Your hair's cool." He responded with a small, appreciative nod, but remained silent. Afterward, in the cafeteria, he located an unoccupied table close to the vending machine. He was comfortable with solitude. He enjoyed watching initially, noting who laughed excessively, who moved in groups, who acted differently than they truly were. A definite pattern existed. Crest Hill operated with unwritten guidelines. There were the drama students, the sports teams, those who wore costly hoodies and spoke as if they were online personalities. And then there were those who maintained order, deciding who held significance. He noticed one of them before the 6th period began. He was tall, blonde, and boisterous, conversing with a group by the lockers, and they were all laughing excessively at something. Therese hadn't learned the boy's name yet, but he observed how other students either displayed overly enthusiastic smiles around him or avoided eye contact. Individuals of that nature were consistently the same, those who required an audience. Therese continued walking. Upon arriving home that afternoon, he placed his bag near the kitchen door. His mother was preparing red beans and rice, humming softly. "How was your first day?" she asked without turning from the stove. He shrugged. "Same as usual. Did you make any friends?" she inquired. "Not yet." His father, seated at the table in a pressed polo, looked up from his tablet. "Are people staring?" he asked. Therese paused. "Don't hesitate to address it," his dad said, his voice even. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, but you also won't allow them to take advantage of you. Do you understand?" Therese nodded. "Yeah. You're not attending that school simply to endure it. You are there to command your presence, silent if you desire, vocal if you select, but never allow anyone to define you based on their assumptions." His dad expressed himself in that manner often, not through formal talks, but through subtle guidance, valuable insights woven into the aroma of coffee or while tending to his boots in the garage. Therese paid close attention. He consistently listened. The following morning, as he secured his hair back in the mirror, he reflected on his father's words. He didn't need to create a disturbance. He simply needed to be dependable. However, even dependability couldn't prevent a storm from developing. Within the first week, Therese understood the social dynamics well. Crest Hill wasn't overtly unfriendly, but it had its nuances, those subtle cues that revealed the power structure. And centrally positioned within that was Brent Granger. Brent wasn't the largest student, but he carried himself as if he were. His dad owned and operated Granger Buick GMC, a car dealership located off the main highway, and it was well known throughout town. He habitually wore his hoodie halfway off his shoulders, kept his socks pulled up high, and had a knack for transforming every classroom into his own personal game show. Teachers put up with him. Students either adored him or actively avoided eye contact. There was no middle ground. Tyrese understood this perfectly. Brent wasn't seeking popularity. He wanted to be feared, admired, and followed. He had cultivated this reputation through a deliberate strategy, employing boisterous jokes, harsh nicknames, and ensuring he had an audience whenever he criticized someone. On Wednesday, Tyrese passed the outdoor basketball court during lunch. Brent was present with his group, Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick, all 8th graders, all known for being loud. Chadwick noticed Tyrese first. "Yo, new kid, do you play?" he yelled, spinning a ball on his finger. Tyrese continued walking, his earbuds in. Brent gave a smirk. Was he really spending that much time on his hair? The others chuckled. Tyrese remained unfazed. However, he registered every comment. Later that day, Logan brushed against him in the hallway. "Oops," he stated matter-of-factly, without acknowledging him. It wasn't accidental, it was a challenge. That night, Tyrese sat on the back porch with his dad, an ice pack on his knee. He'd received a hard elbow during P basketball. It was the same group, insufficient for a formal report, but enough to send a message. His dad looked at him, but remained silent initially. "I'm good," Tyrese stated. "I know you are," his father responded. But being good isn't the same as being ready. Ready for what? Tyrese pondered. He didn't desire to be the angry child. He didn't want to be a target, either. He simply wanted to be left undisturbed. However, individuals like Brent tend to recognize those who are reserved. They test and provoke, anticipating a vulnerability. And Tyrese? He remained steadfast. He was carefully considering his actions. Friday arrived. It was gym class time. The locker room before the bell consistently held a peculiar atmosphere, a combination of boisterous energy and the scent of deodorant. Tyrese was securing his shoelaces when Brent entered late, holding a pair of scissors. "New kid?" Brent called out across the room. "Did your mom forget to give you a haircut?" Tyrese remained silent, continuing to tie his shoes. "Man, you're sporting a whole jungle on your head." Several students laughed. A few appeared awkward, but offered no comment. Then Brent approached. He held the scissors in one hand, mimicking a playful gesture, waving them around. "Just saying, bro, you'd probably make a whole wig with what you got." Tyrese finally looked up, maintaining a calm demeanor, his eyes steady. He appeared neither scared nor angry, but completely focused. "You good?" Tyrese asked, his voice low. Brent blinked. "What?" I said, "Are you good?" Brent stared at him, momentarily disoriented. "You talk now," he snapped, attempting to regain his composure. "Man, whatever." He turned and left, discarding the scissors into a locker as if they held no significance. Yet, Tyrese understood the gesture. It was a display of dominance, a deliberate act. Brent, however, was unprepared for the consequences when the pretense ended. By the start of the second week, a change was palpable. It wasn't overt, nothing that could be documented in an official reprimand. Still, Tyrese sensed it. Entering class, he noticed subtle looks. Not fear, not interest, simply observation. A posture of expectation, as if everyone anticipated a confrontation. He preferred to avoid entanglement. Within Mr. Delano's science lab, he heard a student whisper, "That's the person Brent is involved with." During lunchtime, another student subtly shifted their tray when Tyrese took a seat at the table's end. He remained composed, neither adjusting his position nor expressing any reaction. He simply ate more slowly. One afternoon, While on his way to the library, a seventh grader, a slender boy with braces, approached him near the vending machines. "Hey," the boy said, slightly winded, "are you Tyrese?" Tyrese looked over. He cautioned, "Just, be careful around Brent. He's been speaking about you. Said he intends to make a statement." Tyrese questioned that. "A point?" His companion confirmed, "Yes. He says you believe you're superior to everyone. He's planning to correct you." The young man paused before adding, "He did something to a sixth grader last year. He poured a milkshake on his head during lunch." Everyone laughed. It was quite disturbing. Tyrese acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you." The boy appeared to want to add something, but someone called his name, and he ran off. That evening, Tyrese lay on the living room rug, feet resting on the couch, looking at his phone. His mom was close by, checking papers. "Something on your mind?" she asked without looking up. He hesitated. "Have you ever had someone harass you just to see you react?" She set down her pen and turned to him. "You mean like bullying?" "I mean like they notice you don't join their games, so they force you into one." She paused, allowing the words to linger. "I've encountered individuals like that before," she remarked. "In college, even during my first teaching job, some people struggle to grasp peace unless it aligns with their expectations." He responded, "You maintain your principles. You acknowledge your identity, and you refuse to allow others to compromise your stability." He nodded in agreement. His father entered the room, wiping his hands with a towel. "Do you wish to speak with me?" he inquired directly. Tyrese observed them both, then straightened up. "I thought," his dad said, settling into the chair opposite him. "Is that the boisterous one?" "Yes." "What is he doing?" "Nothing yet. Just comments. Bumping into me. Talking as if he's seeking a reaction." "Is it effective?" Tyrese shook his head. "No, but it's becoming tiresome." His father leaned forward. "Let me tell you something," he said. "The world is full of kids like Brent. It doesn't matter if you're 13 or 30. Some of them have loud voices. Some wear uniforms. Some hide behind keyboards. They all behave similarly. They test and challenge you, attempting to provoke a reaction, either a rash response or retreat," he indicated by tapping his finger on the coffee table. "You refrain from either action. You remain composed until they acknowledge they're confronting an unexpected challenge." Tyrese looked at him. "Can I strike him?" he inquired. "If necessary," his dad replied, "but not fueled by anger. Never out of anger. You strike to halt the behavior, not to dominate." His mother remained silent, but offered no disagreement either. The following day, Brent passed Tyrese in the hallway and bumped his books from his hand. The papers spread out, fluttering across the tile. Brent smiled, a seemingly accidental gesture. Tyrese bent down, gathering them up individually. Several students paused to observe. Others looked away. Brent remained, waiting. When Tyrese straightened, he remained silent. He simply stared, a prolonged gaze that made Brent blink. "What?" Tyrese spoke, his tone even, just enough to convey, "I see you. I am not afraid of you, and I am not responding as you instructed." Brent's smile disappeared. "However, some individuals require explicit clarification, detailed step by step." It was gym day once again, and the locker room was filled with typical middle school activity. Sneakers scraping against the floor, lockers banging, the sound of inexpensive deodorant spraying permeating the space. Tyrese consistently prepared quickly. He entered and exited swiftly, avoiding conversation, showing off, or joking. He approached it as a task. When he entered, Brent was already present, seated on the bench as if expecting someone. It seemed he was the observer now. Tyrese remained composed, located his locker, entered the combination, and concentrated on changing. He sensed eyes on him, not just Brent's, but others as well. Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick. Even some students who typically stayed out of things. "Yo, Brent said, rising deliberately. You still rocking those spaghetti ropes on your head?" A faint sound, like laughter, rippled through the room, but it lacked strength, as if even amusement had become weary. Tyrese concentrated on his shoes, securing the laces firmly. Brent approached. He retrieved an object from his pocket. Scissors, silver, sharp, and genuine, likely taken from an art class or workshop. Have you ever considered change? Brent inquired, manipulating the scissors with 2 fingers as if they were a plaything. It could tidy you up. You might actually appear normal. Tyrese raised his gaze, his face blank, without a flicker of movement. Brent smiled. Before anyone could intervene, he reached out and cut. A moment of dread. The cut was clean at the base. It fell to the floor like a fallen leaf. Several children gasped. One whispered, "Yo." For a brief instant, everything paused. Tyrese rose, steadily, without haste, without hesitation. His expression remained unchanged, but something shifted behind his eyes. He looked down at the dread on the floor. Then he looked up at Brent. "You think this is amusing?" he asked. Brent smirked, slightly. Tyrese did not shout. He did not lash out. He advanced, composed, deliberate, and struck Brent with a quick elbow to the chest. Brent recoiled, astonished, gasping. Before he could respond, Tyrese intervened once more. Rotation, sweep, ascent. Brent fell heavily to the ground, without flourish, without ostentation, simply efficient motion. His father had instructed him in that. Accuracy, not force. Brent attempted to rise. Tyrese positioned a knee on his chest and moved in close. "You do not touch me again," he stated. Voice even. Never. The room was utterly silent. It was documented. Naturally, Coach Timmons entered the room just 2 seconds afterward. Tyrese signaled, using a whistle as if they were on a football field. "Hey, what's happening?" Tyrese retreated. Brent was on the floor, one hand pressed to his ribs, the other still holding the scissors. Coach addressed both boys. "Office now." The journey to the principal's office was quiet. Tyrese remained silent. Brent attempted to portray himself as the injured party, murmuring about his intentions and claiming it was merely a joke, his hands visibly shaking. Principal Rossner observed them, her expression stern behind her square glasses. "Begin speaking," she instructed. Brent spoke first, attributing the incident to Tyrese, asserting that he reacted inexplicably and it was a misunderstanding. Tyrese remained silent, patiently waiting. Subsequently, he retrieved an item from his pocket and placed it on the desk. A cut dread. He maintained direct eye contact with Principal Rossner. "He brought scissors to school." Rossner blinked as he cut my hair. Her face remained still, though her eyes shifted. She then turned to Brent. "Is that true?" Brent stammered. "It was a joke. I wasn't going to actually—" "You cut his hair?" No response was given. "I want your parents here." "Now." Coach Timmons stood behind them, arms crossed, silent. 20 minutes later, Tyrese's mom arrived, entering calmly, but with firmness. She sat next to her son, placed a hand on his shoulder, and looked the principal directly in the face. "Before we say a word," she stated, "I want to know if you all understand what this means." Rossner exhaled slowly. "We're handling it." "You better." But the truth was, this wasn't just a school issue anymore. It was bigger, and it wasn't going away quietly. By that evening, the video had already started making its rounds. It wasn't a long clip, just 10 seconds, but it showed everything. Brent moved forward with scissors. Tyrese advanced, executing a takedown. Following that, there was a close-up shot of Tyrese leaning in, appearing composed and resolute. The quietness in the locker room spoke volumes. The incident spread through group chats and Instagram stories. Even a few students from Northwood High School shared it with captions such as "He messed with the wrong one," and "Brent got folded." Tyrese made no posts about it. He offered no comments. He felt no need to. His parents were seated at the kitchen table, facing Principal Rossner and Brent's parents, Dean and Colleen Granger. Dean was wearing an expensive watch and a blazer with jeans. Colleen had sunglasses resting on her head, as if she had just left the country club brunch. "Let's be clear," Dean stated, attempting to take charge of the discussion. "Our son made a mistake, but it was simply a prank. Boys his age do not always grasp boundaries. Cutting someone's hair is assault." Tyrese's mother responded, her tone sharp. "Not a prank." Dean questioned the situation. Tyrese's dad moved closer. "Let me explain, man. I served in the Marines. I've led squads in countries you couldn't find on a map. You know what isn't tolerated, regardless of location? Disrespect, particularly when it's masked with explanations." Colleen moved in her seat. "We're just suggesting that maybe your son reacted excessively." Tyrese's mom slowly turned toward her. "Repeat that." "I'm just saying. Perhaps a less forceful approach would have been preferable." Brent did not inflict any physical harm. "Cutting a child's hair without permission is a humiliating act," Rossner finally stated. "Regardless of Brent's intentions, the effect is the same. And if it had been your son's hair, Mrs. Granger, I doubt you'd view it as humorous," Dean said, folding his arms. "So what's the next step? Will Brent be suspended?" "He's suspended for 10 days, Rossner replied directly. "And, subject to the school board's review, we might consider a longer suspension," Dean remarked. Regarding the incident, Rossner stated it was about bringing a weapon into the school, targeting another student, and provoking violence, not over a haircut. Tyrese remained silent throughout the entire discussion, his hands in his lap and his posture upright. He displayed no signs of gloating or smirking. Outside the room, several students observed through the glass door. News of the event had quickly circulated. The following day at school, Tyrese walked the hallway as he typically did, but a noticeable change was present. Some students acknowledged him with nods. Several people simply moved aside to let him pass. A seventh grader approached and exclaimed, "Yo, that thing you did was crazy." Tyrese continued walking. He had no desire for attention and just wanted to get to class. During math, Logan and Chadwick remained silent, offering no jokes or taunts. Brent's group had dispersed. Lacking their leader, they didn't behave as they usually did. Tyrese took his seat, retrieved his pencil, and began his assignment. That afternoon, as Tyrese left school, a teacher he hadn't known well approached him by the parking lot. "Are you okay?" Tyrese nodded. "I just want you to know what you did. How you handled that. It took strength, not just in the moment, but the way you've carried yourself afterward." "Thanks," Tyrese said. "I'm just trying to keep it steady." The teacher smiled. "That's harder than it looks." But respect earned through silence doesn't fade easily, and Brent was beginning to learn that the hard way. Brent's 10-day suspension felt lengthy for all except him. As he remained at home, restricted and disheartened, the school continued. He had anticipated students would support him, perhaps dismissing the situation as they typically did. However, a shift occurred. Students weren't simply avoiding him. They were discussing him. Murmurs in the hallways, uncomfortable pauses in group chats, videos circulated with captions such as "Not so tough now" or "Play stupid games." Brent's reputation suffered a significant blow. It fractured. Tyrese continued to be consistently present. Headphones on, locker tidy, assignments completed punctually. He avoided any displays of arrogance or a triumphant demeanor. However, his presence felt more substantial now. Not intimidating, simply resolute, as if he was unyielding. The following week, the school arranged a facilitated meeting between the families, an opportunity to discuss the incident and, at least from the district's perspective, reinstate a conducive learning atmosphere. Tyrese was reluctant to attend. His parents advised him, sometimes the most impactful action is simply being present. And that's what he did. They convened in the counselor's office. It was a small room with a circle of chairs that didn't match. Brent entered with a tense neck and a wounded sense of self. He avoided eye contact with Tyrese. His mother appeared more irritated than regretful. His father wore the familiar smirk, as if he were attending out of duty, not thought. Ms. Harrell, the school counselor, inhaled deeply. "We're not here to revisit what occurred. Our intention is to allow everyone the opportunity to share their feelings and discuss how we can proceed." She addressed Brent. "Would you like to start?" Brent adjusted in his chair. "I was simply joking around. There was no intention behind it." Tyrese remained silent. Brent continued, "I didn't realize it would be such a significant issue." Tyrese's mom raised an eyebrow. She stated that cutting a boy's hair is a deeply personal act, particularly when that hair symbolizes something beyond mere appearance. Brent mumbled, "I wasn't aware of that." Tyrese's father stated, "You didn't care to know. That's the difference." Ms. Harrell then addressed Tyrese, asking, "Would you like to say something?" Tyrese looked up, making eye contact with Brent for the first time in the room. "I didn't come here to fight," he said quietly. I didn't come here to make friends either. I came here to get through school. Regarding his hair, he added, "That's my business. It's part of me. You touched it like it was yours to joke about." Brent shifted in his seat, remaining silent. "I didn't strike you due to a loss of control," Tyrese explained. "I struck you because you needed to grasp a certain point, and verbal communication wasn't effective." A pause settled over the room. Brent's mother then addressed the group. "We have discussed boundaries with him." "Have we, Brent?" Brent responded with a restrained nod. "Yes." Miss Harrell added, "Occasionally, consequences provide more valuable lessons than spoken words." She then turned toward Tyrese. "Are you satisfied with the current situation?" Tyrese gave a slight shrug. "I do not require an apology." Brent raised his head. "I do apologize, however." Tyrese observed him, not with the intention of causing Brent discomfort, but to understand his delivery. Frankly, Tyrese didn't detect much substance behind the words. "Okay," Tyrese stated finally. "Then carry it." "Carry what?" Brent asked, puzzled. "The apology? The lesson? The understanding that not everyone will permit you to belittle them and dismiss it with laughter?" Tyrese rose. "That's all I needed to say." His parents followed him from the room. In the hallway, his father placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't fight in that room," he said, "but you still reacted." He continued, "But the thing about true strength? It doesn't manifest in punches. It shows up in how you choose to leave." A week later, Crest Hill Middle held a school-wide assembly. Officially, the assembly was about respect and accountability, but everyone understood what caused it. Even teachers were discussing the incident in the break room, though no one voiced it directly. A palpable restlessness filled the gym as students, anticipating a standard presentation and hollow words, grew bored. Then, Principal Rossner took a surprising action. She approached the front without a microphone, relying solely on her voice and a confident stride. "We're facing a recent event that has prompted us to reflect," she stated, and the room fell silent. "I'm not going to repeat the details of what occurred. My purpose is to discuss the underlying causes and chart a course for moving ahead." She refrained from mentioning any individuals. It wasn't necessary. She emphasized, "This school is not a place where power is gained through popularity or intimidation. Respect isn't earned by volume or the number of laughs you receive. It's earned through how you treat others." Even when no one was observing, a few students glanced around, some shifted uncomfortably, but others remained focused, listening. Tyrese was seated near the back. He didn't withdraw. He didn't exaggerate his presence, either. He simply maintained the posture he now adopted as he walked through the hallways, balanced and steady. Following the assembly, several students approached him. "You all right, man?" One student inquired. "Yeah," Tyrese responded. "You handled that situation differently than I would have," another student observed. Tyrese simply shrugged. A sense of silent acknowledgement began to replace the previous laughter. Even the faculty noticed. Mr. Delano stopped him following science class and remarked, "I hope you're proud of how you conducted yourself." Tyrese smiled and replied, "I'm just trying to be steady." The significant event occurred a few days later during art class. Miss Ruiz gave the class a project exploring identity, focusing on self-perception and external perception. She indicated the project could take any form, such as a painting, sculpture, or even a college application. Tyrese created a painting, a portrait of a boy with locks, cropped, and one missing. The depiction wasn't conveying sadness or anger, but rather portraying the boy standing tall amidst a storm, with other figures indistinct in the background. When he shared his work, the class fell silent. "I created this," he stated, "because occasionally people fail to understand how profoundly something seemingly insignificant can matter. They dismiss it as mere hair or a simple joke, but it holds deeper meaning. It's about what it symbolizes." The room was silent. Miss Ruiz's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. She simply nodded. That day, after school, Brent walked past him in the hallway, unaccompanied, without his usual entourage or any commotion. He offered a brief glance. Not an apology, not a confrontation, just recognition. Tyrese nodded once. Nothing further. It wasn't a close bond, but it was a respectful separation. Returning home that evening, his mom was preparing sweet potatoes in the kitchen. Did the art project go well? She inquired. Better than well, he replied. His dad entered from the garage. Did you receive a response regarding your student council essay? His father asked. Yes, Tyrese confirmed, smiling. You're accepted, his father said, pleased. Calmly, proudly. You deserve that, he said. Afterward, as Tyrese prepared for bed, he gazed into the mirror. One section remained noticeably shorter than the others. He hadn't corrected it. He chose to do it this way, not because he lacked the ability, but because it wasn't necessary. It served as a reminder of the challenges he had already overcome, of what didn't break him, of who he was before, during, and after the storm. Because some conflicts aren't about achieving victory. They're about ensuring the subsequent one doesn't unfold in a similar fashion. If this account resonated with you, evoked an emotion, please share it. A lesson can be found within, and perhaps someone in your circle needs to hear it. Join our mailing list for more stories that speak truth, challenge disrespect, and remind us all what quiet strength truly embodies. A $1 million neighborhood was constructed on land that had been in his family for over a century. However, when Elijah presented a handwritten clause dated 1923, the entire development and every home within it legally reverted to his ownership. Elijah Jackson didn't require an alarm clock. For 30 years, he had woken naturally just before sunrise, made his coffee, and walked out to the back porch of his father's old farmhouse near Opelika, Alabama. From that quiet wooden deck, he had a clear view across the southern field, the very field where his great-grandfather Otis grew sweet potatoes in the 1930s, and where Elijah's own children had once played in the tall grass. But that morning, something was amiss. The ground felt altered. It trembled. Elijah peered into the distance. Beyond the trees, past the fence line, plumes of red dirt rose into the sky. The machinery was present, heavy, loud, and incongruous. He placed his coffee down and headed towards the sound. Reaching the ridge, he halted, stunned. 3 bulldozers were visible. Behind them, construction teams in hard hats and neon vests were marking the ground with flags, as if claiming it was unclaimed land. But it wasn't. He quickened his pace, the Georgia clay swirling up around his boots. "Hey," he called. A woman in a light gray blazer turned toward him, sunglasses and a clipboard in hand. She seemed out of place in a field. She appeared someone who had never worn work boots. "Can I assist you, sir?" she inquired, her voice suggesting she already anticipated the response. Elijah surveyed the scene. "What is the purpose of your presence on my land?" Her eyebrow showed little movement. This parcel was approved for residential development under West Haven HOA's expansion permit. "You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" Elijah's voice rose slightly. "My name is Elijah Jackson. That piece of land has been in my family since 1923. It is not for sale. It never has been." The woman held her clipboard up like a shield. County records indicate this section was listed as unclaimed due to boundary discrepancies during the last zoning update. "You're welcome to speak with our legal team, but construction is already underway." Elijah's heart was thumping hard now, but not from fear. "Ma'am, that land is not unclaimed. I have walked it every morning since I was 27 years old. My father was born right over that rise. You're building on ground that holds more history than you could encompass with your permits." She offered a polite, empty smile. "Then I suggest you take it up with zoning and planning. We're moving forward." The machines revved louder behind her. Foundations were being dug. Trees that once shaded Elijah's childhood baseball games were now being stripped away root by root. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply turned and walked back towards his house. His pace was slower now. Inside, he went directly to the cabinet above the fireplace. It held old papers, maps, and deeds, dusty and yellowed with age. He recalled his father once saying Otis didn't trust anybody with this land, not even the government. At the time, Elijah had considered it mere paranoia. But as the ground outside was being torn apart, that paranoia felt more like protection. He carefully unfolded the brittle deed and saw it. The faded ink revealed Otis Jackson's name. 88 acres were purchased for $480 in 1923. There were no loans, no banks involved. It was built on sweat, grit, and the unwavering pride of a man determined to leave nothing for anyone else to claim. Elijah settled down. Documents lay before him. A growing unease began in his stomach. Something felt amiss. This wasn't simply a clerical error. He reached for the phone and contacted the Lee County Zoning Office. "I'm calling regarding a construction crew impacting a portion of my property. My name is Elijah Jackson. My family has owned this land for over 100 years. The person I spoke with initially responded with a detached, scripted tone. They stated that if my land was affected by the zoning realignment, I should have received a mail notification. I did not receive any notification. They suggested that notices can occasionally be lost, and then ended the conversation. It was dismissed with that, lost. Potentially, decades of family ownership could be jeopardized by a misplaced envelope. However, Elijah wasn't solely feeling anger. He recalled a story his father had shared with him. Years had passed since Elijah had last touched the old trunk located at the back of the hallway closet. He pulled it out slowly, coughing as dust filled the narrow corridor. His knees cracked as he knelt, unlatching the brass lock. The lid opened with a tired creak. Inside, among black and white photos, funeral programs, and Otis's tarnished railroad watch, was a bundle of paper wrapped in oilcloth, precisely where his father indicated it would be. Elijah was seated on the floor, cross-legged, carefully unrolling the cloth and retrieving a weighty, leather-bound envelope. This was the original deed, the one Otis had kept for himself. Initially, it appeared like any other legal document: printed text, handwritten notes in the margins, a wax seal partially worn. However, concealed roughly midway through the second page, in Otis's faint, cursive writing, was something unexpected. In his own handwriting, squeezed into the margins, a note read, "If any buildings are built on this land without the agreement of the deed holder or their closest relative, those buildings will automatically belong to the deed holder and no payment will be given." This was witnessed and signed on February 2nd, 1923. Elijah blinked. He read it again and again. His hands trembled. He wasn't legally trained, unlike lawyers, but he knew the story behind that clause. It concerned how Otis had distrusted men in suits, particularly landmen. Following a near deception in 1931, where he almost sold half the property for a minimal price, Otis had personally compensated a notary to assist him in drafting what he termed a safeguard impenetrable to any attempt to bypass it. This safeguard wasn't constructed from physical materials like wood or wire. It was comprised of carefully chosen words. Elijah reached for the telephone once more. He contacted Mr. Boone, the local attorney his family had relied on for 3 generations. "I need to show you something," Elijah stated. "It's about the land, about Otis." After 3 hours, Elijah was seated in the worn leather armchair, facing Boone's desk. The lawyer peered through bifocals, carefully examining the document. "Well, I'll be," he remarked, tapping a knuckle against the clause. "You don't see this kind of thing anymore, but it's clever. If this was notarized and filed with the original deed, it's enforceable." "It is notarized," Elijah said. Otis made absolutely certain of that. Boone nodded. "It's old, yes, but if it's on the record, it's still the law. It might be buried in archives somewhere, but that doesn't make it disappear. So what do I do?" "First," Boone said, pulling a legal pad toward him, "you don't say a word to those developers. Let them build. Every house they finish becomes yours. It wasn't due to your identity, but because of Otis. That man didn't simply leave you land. He left you a carefully constructed snare. A remarkably clever one." Elijah relaxed, feeling the significance of it acutely. He's been prepared to initiate a conflict, enter courtrooms, and navigate bureaucratic hurdles to demonstrate what rightfully belonged to him. But Otis had already handled the struggle. Now, Elijah only needed to wait. Nevertheless, he wasn't foolish. He contacted 2 additional lawyers, just to be certain. One for Montgomery, one for Birmingham. He provided them with scanned copies of the deed, the clause, and the notarization. Both contacted him again within a week. This is the most secure private property clause I've ever encountered, one stated, Mr. Jackson. It's as if your great-grandfather constructed a legal landmine. The other remarked, I've never seen anything like it. As long as you record the construction, everything they build becomes yours. Every nail, every foundation. Consequently, Elijah purchased a drone and employed a professional surveyor. Motion sensor cameras were installed along the southern field's edge. He meticulously documented everything. This included timestamps, recorded footage, ground measurements, copies of sale signs, and open house flyers. Each day, he observed the actions of the West Haven HOA, actions that he believed they should never have taken. They constructed as if they held absolute ownership and marketed as if they had the right to sell. But Elijah understood the truth. And Otis? Otis had anticipated this day for 100 years. If the clause proved to be true, Elijah understood he had a single course of action remaining: to wait. Each morning, shortly after sunrise, Elijah would position himself on the grassy ridge, the site of the former barbed wire fence. He would rest against the wooden post that he and his father had set into the ground many years prior, with his arms crossed and a camera around his neck, observing. The land below was undergoing change. Where sweet potatoes once grew and his cousin had broken his leg attempting to ride a makeshift dirt bike, now stood rows of modern homes. The exteriors featured vinyl siding in muted colors, fenced-in backyards, and driveways so smooth they didn't feel like they belonged in the country. It felt like watching someone else rearrange your childhood memories without permission. Roads were paved with names like Sycamore Lane and Sunset Walk. Pretty names, but lacking any history. Light poles were installed, sidewalks were poured, and even a cul-de-sac was added that cut right through the grove where Elijah's mother had planted muscadines. The HOA proceeded quickly. Too quickly. Within a month, foundations were set for 20 homes. Real estate agents began appearing on weekends, conducting open houses and offering guided tours to couples and retirees. Large signs near the front entrance announced, now selling, starting at $385,000. Elijah remained silent. He simply observed. He recorded everything. Daily drone footage was recorded. Close-up photos of property markers were taken. Videos documented workers pouring concrete, installing electrical lines, and setting frames. He organized all of this in a folder on his laptop labeled Otis's Revenge. Occasionally, a project manager or a site supervisor noticed him. Sometimes they waved. Once a man with a clipboard called out, "Morning," with forced cheerfulness. Elijah did not reply. His purpose was not to socialize. He was there to observe. Then Jessica arrived. Jessica Brenner. She remained consistently the woman she had always been, clipboard and blazer. Initially, she didn't recognize Elijah upon his reappearance at the ridge. However, within 3 weeks, she began to acknowledge him. On one occasion, she smiled and called out, "Still watching us, Mr. Jackson?" Elijah responded by raising his camera and photographing her. She did not smile again afterward. New houses appeared rapidly, like weeds spreading. The swift pace was unsettling. One day, there would be bare ground. 3 days elapsed, and the construction reached the stage of a complete frame and roof. By the close of the second month, 32 homes had been framed. Of those, 16 were completed, featuring laid sod and polished front porches ready for weekend viewings. Elijah, however, remained undeterred. He proceeded to the county clerk's office to retrieve the most recent sales records. He observed West Haven's name appearing alongside buyers, with the buyers primarily from out of state, Ohio, Florida, and even some originating from California. He meticulously recorded observations, noting each closing date. He verified the location of each home, confirming its presence within the 88-acre zone. All residences were situated inside Otis's boundary. All of them. He even overheard Jessica one morning speaking on the phone while walking the site. She said, "Yeah, Phase 1's flying off the market. We're starting Phase 2 next month. No issues on our end. The local guy watching from the ridge, just some nosy landowner trying to stir up drama. We're clear." Elijah clenched his teeth, but remained silent. She had no idea. He possessed 3 legal opinions supporting his position. He had documented evidence, with timestamps, of construction on the contested land. He had Otis's clause. And crucially, he had time. Allowing them to build wasn't merely a tactic, it was a matter of justice. Each home they finished, every square foot they sold, contributed to a debt they were unaware of accumulating. Elijah had already calculated the figures. If the construction followed the initial plan for all 156 homes, along with the community clubhouse and parkland, the total value of the real estate would approach $70 million. This would be transferred to him. Jessica believed she was developing a neighborhood, but Elijah understood the reality. She was, in effect, expanding his portfolio. However, as the sold signs accumulated, Elijah started questioning how long he could delay the arrival of actual families. The first time Elijah observed children cycling on the newly constructed sidewalks, he experienced a disconcerting sensation in his chest. A profound sadness, not anger nor regret. The children were oblivious. Naturally, they played, circling, chasing, laughing as children do. Their parents watched, enjoying coffee on porches overlooking the Jackson property. This was land Elijah's great-grandfather had cleared manually. A few houses down, a young couple was unpacking boxes. The man waved. Elijah raised his hand a little, without knowing why. He was unfamiliar with them. They were unfamiliar with him. The new driveway occupied what had previously been his grandmother's garden. He walked home at a slower pace that day, not due to any need discomfort, but because the anger that had propelled him was beginning to transform into a different feeling. That evening, he was alone in his den, the deed spread out before him, as usual. The clause remained present, tangible, and still his. However, now he saw faces connected to the houses. He recognized people, not suits, not developers. Families were attempting to establish themselves on property they were unaware was not available for purchase. He reached for the telephone and contacted Boone. "I need to discuss something with you," Elijah stated. Boone responded, "I'm listening." Elijah continued, "If I delay until all the houses are completed, the price will increase significantly. However, if I intervene now, I might prevent these people from facing a difficult situation. They've just moved in, Boone. I observed a young girl riding a bicycle with training wheels today." A considerable silence followed. Boone's voice softened. "That presents a difficult ethical decision, Elijah. You are requesting something that is not permissible. It's a personal matter. Legally, you are justified, as Otis confirmed. However, what kind of justice do you seek? I am unwilling to cause harm to these individuals," Elijah stated. "Yet, I do want West Haven to be held accountable. They didn't merely trespass. They obliterated my family's history as if it held no significance. Then perhaps the true inquiry is it possible to inflict pain upon them without harming the people who purchased those homes in good faith?" Elijah rubbed his eyes. "Is it possible?" Boone paused once more. "Gaining their commitment requires careful consideration and meticulous attention to detail. Allow them to actively participate in the process, enabling them to take ownership. Ensure your guidance is clear and impactful, so it resonates even before others become involved." Elijah reclined in his chair. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above him. "I observed someone planting a tree today," he remarked quietly. He appeared pleased, as if envisioning this as their permanent residence. "Perhaps it still could be," Boone responded. "The outcome relies on your actions." That night, Elijah experienced little sleep. He revisited the perimeter of the property, holding a flashlight, observing lights shimmering from windows overlooking the southern field. Within those houses, families were establishing themselves, displaying pictures, preparing meals, and putting children to sleep. He couldn't have been responsible for their losses, yet he couldn't overlook the arrogance of West Haven, Jessica Brenner's dismissive gesture, the unanswered calls from their lawyers, and their disregard for generations, as if constructing on unclaimed territory. Elijah remained motionless for an extended period at the tree line. The wind rustled through the tall grass. He recalled Otis, remembering the nights that man had kept watch on the porch, a shotgun resting across his lap, prepared for any trouble. Otis favored immediate action. However, Elijah valued strategy and carefully considered his options. He resolved to wait until the final brick was in place, not to inflict harm upon the families, but to ensure those who had shown disrespect towards his family faced the complete consequence. And then, he would ensure no one ever forgot the name Otis Jackson. But Elijah understood that patience wouldn't simplify the next phase. It would only make it more significant. The notification arrived by mail, enclosed within a polished invitation featuring gold detailing. You are cordially invited to the grand opening of West Haven Estates, Phase 2 celebration and ribbon-cutting ceremony. Join us for food, live music, and a look at the future of luxury living in Easter Alabama. Elijah examined the card for a minute before setting it on the kitchen counter beside the deed. The event was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April. At that time, 138 homes were completely built. An additional 18 were undergoing final inspections. The community center had recently opened, featuring a pool, tennis courts, and a marble floor lobby resembling a country club. It was being hailed as the crown jewel of the county, and every inch of it was situated on Jackson land. The night before, Elijah carefully ironed his only suit, the one he wore to church, weddings, and funerals, paying special attention to the cuffs, a detail Otis would have emphasized. He packed a leather folder containing the original deed, the notarized clause, the surveyor's report, photo evidence, and legal opinions. He placed it on the passenger seat with the care one would give a newborn child. As he arrived at the newly paved entrance of West Haven Estates, the morning sun broke through. Banners fluttered in the breeze. A white tent stood on the clubhouse lawn where guests enjoyed champagne and sampled small sandwiches off silver trays. He parked near the back of the lot, concealed from view. No one recognized him. Not yet. From the periphery of the gathering, Elijah observed as Jessica Brenner, wearing a vibrant yellow dress and large sunglasses, approached the podium. Microphones were adjusted. Camera flashes went off. "Welcome," she exclaimed. "Today signifies both the completion of our second phase and the beginning of a promising new era for our community." Applause resonated. The mayor stood beside her. Several county officials, whom Elijah had contacted months prior without receiving a response, were also present. Jessica continued, her voice gaining intensity with each phrase. "Thanks to our exceptional team and the backing of our local government, West Haven is now a home to 156 families and expanding." The string quartet played gently in the background. Elijah moved forward deliberately, the sound of his shoes on the gravel noticeable. Jessica looked towards him, but showed no reaction. Not yet. He raised his voice just enough to be heard over the music. "Before you cut that ribbon," he said calmly, and the crowd fell silent, heads turning. Jessica blinked. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice strained. "This is a private event." "I understand precisely what this concerns," Elijah stated. "That is why I am present." The mayor appeared doubtful. "Could you please elaborate on the problem?" Elijah raised a leather folder. "I am Elijah Jackson. My family has held title to this land for more than 100 years, and every house, road, tennis court, and mailbox West Haven constructed sits on property that was never legally theirs." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. Jessica moved away from the podium. "We pursued all legal avenues. A zoning error occurred some time back that you failed to fix," Elijah added, opening the file. "And significantly, this deed from 1923 includes a provision drafted by my great-grandfather. It specifies that any building constructed without permission transfers ownership to the deed's owner." He presented the document. A reporter, standing close, moved to photograph the page. Jessica's expression remained unchanged. "You're attempting to deceive us," she whispered. "That clause is invalid after this length of time." Elijah remained unmoved. "I've had this examined by 3 lawyers. They all concurred. It carries legal weight. This land belongs to me, and everything constructed upon it as well." A man in a gray suit spoke quietly to Jessica. She visibly paled. The mayor cleared his throat. "We might need to suspend the ceremony." Jessica faced Elijah again, her voice now firm. "You observed. You monitored our construction, and you remained silent. I informed you on your initial visit that it was my land, he stated calmly. I saw you smile, and you called security, instructed me to speak with your legal team. So I did. A gasp came from behind you. It could have been a homeowner or someone else. Reporters were now gathering, with flash bulbs popping and pens writing furiously. Jessica appeared as if she'd swallowed glass. You'll never get away with this, she whispered. I don't have to get away with anything, Elijah replied. You passed the folder to me. He closed it carefully and stepped back. The ceremony was halted. No ribbon was cut. Elijah recognized this as merely the initial stage. The significant repercussions hadn't yet materialized. The following morning, Elijah's phone began ringing before sunrise. An unknown number appeared. He allowed it to proceed to voicemail. Subsequently, it rang again and again. By the afternoon, he had accumulated 12 missed calls for voicemails and 2 emails flagged as urgent from West Haven's legal team. By evening, the local news had broadcast a segment entitled "Man Claims Ownership of Entire HOA Community." Is it legal? The anchor appeared bewildered. Elijah was not. He was at his kitchen table with Boone, examining the deed for what seemed like the 100th time. The wording hadn't changed. The ink remained faded but legible. Boone reclined. They are panicking. They constructed $1 million project on land they didn't own. You possess every advantage. That night, West Haven's president telephoned directly. Elijah didn't recognize the voice. He had never communicated with the man previously, but he detected the strain. Mr. Jackson, I believe it is time we consider a resolution. We are keen to resolve this matter swiftly and discreetly. The current media coverage is not beneficial to anyone involved. We are ready to provide you with appropriate compensation for the land's assessed value, alongside a goodwill premium. Elijah didn't react with laughter, though it was evident he was restraining himself. You're suggesting a payment equivalent to the land's previous worth prior to the construction of the luxury neighborhood? That's a significant offer. It feels like an offensive proposition. Elijah stated, you didn't simply relocate Earth. You sold property you didn't own. And now you wish to purchase it at a reduced price after you sold it for millions? Silence followed, and Elijah could hear the breathing on the other end. Controlled. Stiff. We could challenge this, Mr. Jackson. You could. Elijah concurred. But every home you constructed is already sold. Every buyer now has to question who owns their house. You wish to fight? That will be complicated, costly, and public. Another lengthy pause. We'll be in touch. The line disconnected. 2 days later, the formal offer arrived via courier. The offer included $4.2 million for the land, a non-disclosure agreement, and a confirmation that Elijah would relinquish all claims to the structures built. Boone reacted with disbelief, nearly choking on his coffee. I've seen offers disguised as bribes before, but this is exceptional, he remarked, pushing the proposal away. Elijah remained silent, his attention fixed on his neighbor's children, using a trampoline recently installed where his grandfather used to park his tractor. He was unwilling to have those children displaced. He was unwilling to have those families hurt. However, he also would not allow West Haven to escape with minimal consequences. Therefore, Elijah prepared a response. He refused the offer, requesting the complete assessed value for each sold home and unsold lot, reduced by a 10% discount for a comprehensive settlement. He pledged not to initiate eviction or repossession, but stipulated that West Haven must cover the legal expenses for each homeowner requiring a revised deed. He insisted on ownership of the community center, parks, and all remaining properties, requesting $61 million. There were no restrictions on speaking publicly, and a public apology was required. Jessica did not contact anyone. Her name was absent from any new official communications, though Elijah received reports. She was reportedly on leave. Some believed she had been dismissed, while others said she resigned. Regardless, the dispute had escalated to the boardroom. During the following 4 weeks, legal representatives from both parties met almost daily. Boone and Simone were seated opposite West Haven's corporate counsel, meticulously negotiating while Elijah largely observed the proceedings. They explored various approaches, proposing a reduced sum, hinting at arbitration, and even implying Elijah had knowingly permitted construction to proceed. Elijah remained composed, stating, "You built on my land. I didn't request it. I cautioned you against it. You disregarded me." Ultimately, West Haven conceded. The concluding agreement was finalized 6 weeks after the unsuccessful ribbon cutting. Elijah's total compensation amounted to $54 million, along with ownership of the community clubhouse, the undeveloped lots, and complete legal authority to oversee the correction of homeowner deeds, ensuring no families were displaced. The settlement was formally revealed at a public press conference. Elijah made brief remarks, expressing gratitude to his great-grandfather for his vision and noting that the past occasionally safeguards the future. He departed quietly, avoiding any media attention or interviews. A desire for tranquility remained. However, Elijah wasn't complete. He needed to ensure Otis's legacy represented something greater than retribution. The funds didn't alter Elijah, not in the anticipated manner. He continued to reside in the familiar house, the aged farmhouse where he'd spent his childhood, where his mother's cooking had permeated the walls with the aroma of fried okra, and where Otis's hammer marks were still evident in the doorframe. He didn't purchase a new truck, didn't relocate to a larger city, didn't install fencing around the land. He did, however, create something tangible. Several months following the agreement, Elijah utilized a segment of the funds, approximately $18 million, to purchase an additional 40-acre parcel of land situated 10 miles east outside the town of Tuskegee. This was land that had remained unclaimed for decades. He designated it the Otis Project. Working alongside local contractors, teachers, and community leaders, Elijah initiated the construction of what he envisioned as a unique neighborhood, designed not for financial gain, but for individuals who had previously been excluded from residing in areas like West Haven. The homes were offered at cost, with mortgage support integrated into the program, and applications were evaluated with empathy rather than relying solely on credit scores. Within the first year, 24 homes were finished, and each was occupied by a family. Individuals from all walks of life, teachers, single parents, factory workers, veterans, were welcomed, regardless of their circumstances. One morning, while standing on the first street of the Otis Project, Elijah observed a group of children playing tag on a front lawn. One little boy sparked a memory of his brother Curtis when they were 7 and too stubborn to wear shoes during summer. Boone arrived later that afternoon, holding a clipboard and a wide grin. "You know what they're calling you in town now," he said. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What?" "The accidental mayor," Boone chuckled. "People say you were given millions, and instead of vanishing, you began constructing front porches." Elijah smiled. Otis didn't nurture hoarders. He cultivated workers. This wasn't merely words. Elijah utilized a portion of the remaining funds to establish a community center in Opelika, offering complimentary tutoring programs, job placement assistance, and a garden where seniors instructed children on cultivating tomatoes that weren't purchased from a grocery store. He also transformed the former West Haven Community Clubhouse, which he now legally owned, into a shared resource center, renaming it Jackson Hall. The tennis courts were made available for complimentary lessons to local young people. The pool offered dedicated swim times for seniors 3 mornings each week. While the Homeowners Association initially disapproved, the homeowners themselves greatly appreciated the changes. Initially, a small number of residents distanced themselves from Elijah, fearing he would seize their homes and viewing him as an adversary. Eventually, they understood that he didn't intend to dismantle what they had established. He simply desired recognition for the work his family had previously undertaken. Now, many approached him directly, seeking information about repairs, suggestions for local services, or guidance on cultivating vegetables in Alabama's challenging red clay. He consistently offered assistance to everyone. "I ain't trying to be a hero," he told Yvette, a single mom and one of the new homeowners. "I simply believe land should never be taken without acknowledging those who labored upon it previously." Yvette nodded. "Well, my son considers you a kind of superhero," Elijah chuckled. Have you ever seen me attempt to change a flat tire? He's likely to reconsider quickly. With the commencement of the second year of the Otis Project, Elijah made a final visit to the county archives. This building, where he initially retrieved the original deed, now displayed a framed photograph of Otis Jackson. Below the photo was a plaque that read, "In honor of the man who protected his land so his descendants could protect their community." Elijah stood silently for a moment, then reached into his pocket. He removed a small object wrapped in cloth, Otis's old railroad watch. He carefully set it on the glass counter close to the display. "I always detest being late," Elijah murmured. The sky outside had shifted to that gentle golden hue just prior to sunset, the very shade Otis would often appreciate following a lengthy day in the fields. Elijah smiled, not the smile of a victor, but the smile of one who had fulfilled an obligation. For ultimately, the clause wasn't simply about preventing thieves, it was about ensuring no one overlooked those who preceded them. And now, the land was speaking once more, its voice stronger than the sound of the bulldozers. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing. More stories such as this, authentic, unfiltered, and grounded in truth, are forthcoming.